April 1941. Yugoslavia collapses in fire and confusion. German aircraft bomb Belgrade on April 6, and within days Axis troops pour in from all sides. The Yugoslav army, unprepared and divided by ethnic rivalries, disintegrates in less than 2 weeks. The kingdom is carved apart. Croatia becomes a fascist puppet state ruled by the murderous Ustaša. Serbia falls under direct German occupation, and the rest is divided between Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria. The occupation unleashes a wave of terror marked by executions, deportations, and revenge killings that turn the Balkans into a landscape of fear. From this chaos, resistance movements begin to rise, some fighting for liberation, others for power. Among them emerges a royalist officer who dreams not of rebuilding Yugoslavia, but of creating a greater Serbia cleansed of its non-Serb population. He gathers men in the mountains, calls them Chetniks, and vows to restore order through fire and blood. His struggle becomes one of both resistance and retribution, a campaign against occupiers and civilians alike. His name is Draza Mihailovic. Draža Mihailović, one of 3 children of a clerk, was born on April 27, 1893 in the town of Ivanjica, in the southwestern part of the Kingdom of Serbia. Mihailovic's parents Mihailo and Smiljana Mihailovic died relatively early, and young Draža decided to enter the Serbian army. In 1910 he enrolled at the military academy in Belgrade. As a young cadet, he went to fight in the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 and stayed in the army after the Serbian victories, first against the Ottoman Empire and later against the Kingdom of Bulgaria. When the First World War broke out in the summer of 1914, he served on various fronts and took part also in the famous Serbian retreat through the mountains of Albania, known as the Albanian Golgotha because of the harsh conditions. After the First World War, from which Serbia, despite heavy losses, emerged victorious, and with the creation of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later known as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, Mihailovic held various staff posts in the army. In 1920 he married a young widow, Jelica Lazarevic, and together they had 4 children. Mihailovic was very active during the interwar period and served in various positions, including the Yugoslavian General Staff. He also studied abroad, most notably at the École Spéciale Militaire de Saint-Cyr in France, where he allegedly befriended Charles de Gaulle, the future leader of the Free French forces during the Second World War. At the end of the 1930s, as the situation in Europe worsened, Mihailovic served as military attaché in the Kingdom of Bulgaria, stationed in Sofia, and later was sent to Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, where he stayed until May 1937. After returning to Yugoslavia, he presented to his superiors a plan for the reorganization of the Yugoslav army. It is interesting that already in 1939, his thoughts turned from traditional infantry tactics to guerrilla warfare. He wrote to his superior, the Minister of the Army Milan Nedic, a proposal to reshape the Yugoslavian army. Among his key suggestions were abandoning the defense of the northern frontier to concentrate forces in the mountainous interior, reorganizing the armed forces into national Serb, Croat, and Slovene units to counter subversive activities, and using mobile units along the borders. The reaction of his superiors was negative. The reason was among others strong criticism of Yugoslav army in the Mihailovic proposal. As punishment for his courage to speak, he was confined to barracks for 30 days and transferred from an active unit to a teaching position in Belgrade. This was not the last time he faced disciplinary punishment. In 1940, a few months after the outbreak of the Second World War on September 1, 1939, he was punished again, this time for his anti-Nazi remarks. His stance was so openly anti-German That the German ambassador in Yugoslavia sent a protest note about him to the still neutral Yugoslav Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as he was a vocal anti-Nazi figure. British intelligence officers sought him out in Belgrade in 1940 and questioned him about his thoughts about the army's attitude in case of a coup against the pro-Axis regency of Prince Paul Karađorđević. Soon the questions of British intelligence officers transferred to reality of the coup, but despite his anti-Nazi stance, Mihailovic did not take part in the coup of March 27, 1941, when young King Peter II Karađorđević ended the regency of his pro-German uncle and assumed full powers as a Yugoslavian king. This action enraged Nazi Germany, which decided to punish Yugoslavia for their defiance. After the successful pro-Allied coup, Adolf Hitler immediately ordered the attack against Yugoslavia. On April 6, 1941, German aircraft bombed Belgrade, Yugoslavian capital, in a massive air raid that killed thousands of civilians and destroyed large parts of the city. Within days, German, Italian, Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops advanced from all sides. The Yugoslav army, poorly prepared and ethnically divided, could not resist the large-scaled and coordinated assault as Mihailovic predicted in his proposals in 1939. After only 11 days of fighting, the government signed an unconditional capitulation on April 17, 1941. The state of Yugoslavia ceased to exist and its territory was divided among the Axis powers and their allies to administer the German-occupied zone of Serbia. The Nazi Germany soon installed a puppet government of national salvation headed by former Minister of the Army Milan Nedić. His collaborationist regime maintained limited autonomy under strict German supervision. It controlled part of central Serbia, including Belgrade, and relied heavily on German support. Nedić justified his cooperation as an attempt to preserve order and protect the Serbian population from reprisals, but in practice his administration enforced German occupation policies, including anti-Jewish decrees, forced labor, and the suppression of resistance movements. When the German invasion of Yugoslavia began, Mihailovic was with his unit in eastern Bosnia. After the capitulation of Yugoslavia, he refused to lay down arms. With a small group made up mostly of Serbs, he moved from Bosnia toward central Serbia. On May 6, 1941, near the city of Užice in western Serbia, his column ran into a German unit and was almost destroyed. On May 13, 1941, after weeks on the move, Mihailovic and his men, consisting of only 7 officers and 27 soldiers, reached the mountain Ravna Gora in central Serbia and established their headquarters there. Mihailovic was a Serbian nationalist, envisioning a future Yugoslavia led by the monarchy and dominated by Serbia. He imagined the restored kingdom, or, if idea of united Yugoslavia failed, a greater Serbia that would include territories taken from the Serbian neighbors. But to create Greater Serbia, it was necessary to fight first against occupiers and the German reprisals. For any attacks were ruthless. Adolf Hitler ordered that for every German soldier killed, 100 Serbian hostages must die, and for every wounded, 50. During the war, there were several occasions when Germans almost caught Mihailovic at his camps in the mountains. For example, on December 7, 1941, during the attack against Mihailovic's headquarters, Mihailovic barely escaped and Germans took hundreds of partisans as prisoners. Ironically, on the same day, the exiled King Peter II Karađorđević in London promoted him to a leader of the Yugoslav Home Army. The same month he was promoted to the rank of General of the Army. It was not the last title Mihailovic received during the war. In July 1942, the Germans labeled Mihailovic as the most dangerous enemy in the region and placed a bounty of 100,000 Reichsmarks on him. The reaction of the Chetniks was that during the summer and Autumn of 1942, their troops carried out acts of sabotage against railway lines, bridges, and trains in Serbia, which were important German supply route that ran through Yugoslavia and Italy, to their forces fighting in North Africa. Nazi Germany decided to react with brutal response, and Chetniks were forced to retreat from their positions and civilians were murdered by Germans for their support of the anti-Nazi movement. But Chetniks fought against civilian population. 2. They expelled Muslims and Croats from areas they controlled, and engaged in mass killings of non-Serbian citizens. In the town of Pljevelja, the Chetniks massacred 13 babies in cradles. Then they threw older children, women and old people into houses, filled the buildings with straw or hay, and then set them on fire. They also tied women to oak trees, placing straw beneath them, creating a makeshift pyre, and then burned them while singing. In the municipality of Prazorama, the Chetniks killed every child taller than 128 centimeters, the length of the Italian short rifle. In Prihari village, 52 children were thrown into a pit, and over 20 women were raped. In the village of Delovi, 42 women and children were gathered in a house which was then set on fire. It is established that around 70,000 people from Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina were murdered by Chetniks as they were fighting not only against occupiers but they were ethnically cleansing the territory for future Greater Serbia. Draza Mihailovic, the leader of the Chetniks, was in his position responsible for these atrocities. Croats and Bosnians living in areas intended to be part of Greater Serbia were to be cleansed of non-Serbs in accordance with Mihailovic's orders. Because of his brutal actions against non-Serbian population and strong German countermeasures, Mihailovic was slowly losing support. When on November 7, 1942, Mihailovic called on the Serbian people to engage in civil disobedience against the occupiers, only few responded. One of the reasons of lost support of Mihailovic and his units was that Mihailovic's forces were fighting not only the occupiers but also other Yugoslav partisan movements. The Balkans had descended during the Second World War into civil war, with alliances shifting constantly. After an initial period of cooperation with Josip Broz Tito's communist partisans, who sought to establish a socialist Yugoslavia, relations broke down in 1942 and soon turned into open conflict. Mihailovic, with support from the collaborationist Netic government, attempted to legalize Chetnik formations, receiving money, food, and uniforms also from the Axis powers. At the same time, he tried to convince the British government that he was the only true resistance leader in Serbia. Fearing communist influence, he saw limited cooperation with the occupiers as a lesser evil. The Chetniks, in their view, defended the monarchy and pre-war order, while the Tito's partisans fought for a socialist revolution. Tito's partisans were more effective militarily and politically, establishing people's liberation councils in liberated areas, and at the end they succeeded in gaining support from the Allies. By the mid of the 1943 British policy shifted decisively toward them, and Mihailovic was abandoned by the Allies due to lack of significant anti-Axis action, his focus on internal conflicts, and evidence of collaboration with the Axis against the Tito's partisans. By early 1945, Mihailovic's position was desperate. In April, General Oberst Alexander Lohr, the same man who ordered the bombing of Belgrade in 1941, offered to escort Mihailovic toward Austria to surrender to the British. But he refused. With about 12,000 men, he tried to march back to challenge the new communist regime before they can firmly establish their rule in Yugoslavia. This last and desperate attempt failed, and on May 12, 1945, Mihailovic's forces were surrounded near Kalinovic, a town in the southeastern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and around 9,000 Chetniks were killed and Mihailovic barely escaped. At last, he was captured on the Serbo-Bosnian border on March 13, 1946, after being allegedly betrayed by one of his commanders. Mihailovic was arrested and his trial opened on June 10, 1946 in Belgrade. He was charged with war crimes and collaboration with the enemy. On July 15, 1946, the military court sentenced him to death. His appeal for clemency was rejected the next day. And on July 17, 1946, he was executed by firing squad in Belgrade. He was 53 years old.